Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Henry Schein Dental Academy webinar series. My name is Adam, Marketing Specialist, and I will be your moderator. We're excited to welcome Matt Hironaka, COO and In-house Counsel for Unitas Dental, as our speaker today, as he will discuss insurance write-offs and how to grow your revenues. Before we get started, we've got a few reminders for you. At any point during the webinar, if you have a question, please feel free to type it into the Q&A section of your control panel, and we'll answer them live at the end of the presentation. Henry Schein is not offering CE credit for viewing or attending this presentation live or on demand. And this webinar is sponsored by Henry Schein's Dental Business Institute, as well as Unitas Dental. Matt, take it away.
Hey, thanks, Adam. And thank you to everyone who's joined the webinar today. As Adam said, my name is Matt Hironaka. I'm the Chief Operating Officer here at Unitas, and as well as In-house Counsel. For those of you who are unfamiliar with Unitas, we've been working with dentists and dental practices for about 10 years now. Our primary goal is to help dentists and dental practices evaluate PPO insurance, in-network participation, reimbursements, also how to optimize or adjust participation in order to obtain higher rates of reimbursement. We also work with startup practices and transition practices, and we have standalone credentialing services as well. So we're located in Mesa, Arizona, and we have a team here of over 45 specialists that work with the currently over 1,000 dental practices that we have as customers. Kind of excited to do this topic today. I mean, we've tried to stay away from some of the topics that, some people feel like are to grab audience's attention. And obviously, when you say write-offs in the dental world, that does obviously grab some attention. I haven't liked to do them because I really think that when we call write-offs with respect to insurance reimbursements, it's a little bit of a misnomer. I'm going to talk about that. Another thing that I'm going to talk about is some of the things that does as far as what practices behaviors then do because they are frustrated with the difference between what their UCR office fee is and the reimbursement that they're receiving. So we'll cover the dangers of some improper billing practices that we see, and then we'll get to really then the main thrust of kind of what this webinar is today is, well, how do we improve or better the write-off situation, and really what are those steps to increasing PPO revenue? So first off, we'll talk about again what are write-offs really. I mean, from an accounting standpoint, I think we've used that term incorrectly. I mean, when you talk about a write-off, you're usually referring to a reduction in an asset or in a situation where there's a bad debt. I mean, a customer has purchased services or a product and they've purchased on credit and the seller's unable to collect that. So that is then a bad debt write-off. And so, why we're actually, talking about this again is I think when you say write-off, you're in the mindset that you were entitled to receive something that you did not receive. And so I think then again, it causes frustration. And if we look at it a little bit differently, I think it helps us as we move forward. First thing you have to ask yourself is, again, why you're giving, this discount essentially. And instead of calling it a write-off, I mean, you may have heard the term adjustments. And I think that while, again, not really the proper terminology from an accounting standpoint, I think it does actually encapsulate what's going on a little bit better than write-offs. And so, the reason that you're giving this adjustment or making this adjustment is that when you enroll as an in-network provider, you have a network provider agreement. And one of the main provisions in that is that you agree that when an insured member comes in, that you'll submit a claim. And as long as that service is covered, then the insurance company will pay the lower of the billed charge. That's your UCR office fee or the amount on the associated fee schedule. So this provision in the agreement, you agree as the dental provider, as a practice, that when that insured member comes in, that you will give the discount according to the PPO reimbursement fee schedule. And that will be all that you will collect. I mean, there's other provisions, again, that say that payment that you accept from the insurance company is full payment for that service. So, it's a contract rate that you've agreed to as the dental provider, as the network provider for that plan, to give that discount to that insured member. And so again, if you think in terms of write-off, you're thinking, well, I was entitled to my full UCR. And you think of adjustment, you're understanding, well, no, I've agreed to this contract rate. I've agreed to adjust my usual and customary fee because I've agreed to be part of this preferred provider organization. So I think the next question then you need to ask is, well, why are you making that adjustment? And so I think a lot of practices forget sometimes that there is value participating as a preferred provider. And, it gets lost, I think, a little bit again. And it doesn't mean that you shouldn't be frustrated at times with the reimbursements that you're receiving. But I think when you look at it in the framework of saying, okay, well, what is the consideration that I'm getting? I'm giving the discount. What am I getting in return? So obviously, patient acquisition is one of those things. We know that some patients may not come to see you as the dentist unless you are in network with their plan. I think some things that get lost sight of as well, though, is that consumers, they get these plans for certain reasons. And obviously, a lot of times it's because their employer provides that plan as part of the benefits for working at that company. But a lot of times I think that we as consumers, if we're buying an individual plan, we're looking for a third party to validate that the dentist that we're going to is charging a fair price, and not just fair, it's advantageous for us as the consumer or the patient, that when we go and see this in-network provider, that we are getting a better price than other people are getting. And then, the third thing is that I think you'll see in your own practice, but there's certainly validity that we see out there that patients that are receiving a discount or they're getting, the contract rate, that they're accepting treatment more readily than those patients that don't have any type of benefit plan or were not receiving a discount. So, I think, again, it's important that just, terminology is important, kind of, that if you think again that you are making an adjustment, you are agreed to a contract rate to this specific patient population that are members of this plan that you've agreed to be an in-network provider for. And then again, that you're evaluating what is the value of your participation in this plan. I think that there's a little less frustration, and then you can work towards, hey, how do I make the situation better for my practice? Again, I think it also allows you to really evaluate at the end and say, well, am I getting this value? I'm giving a big discount to these patients. Am I receiving in return that value? And so if you're not, well, then maybe you need to start evaluating whether you should continue to participate in that specific plan. Another thing that we again see that when practices look at it in terms of being a write-off, that they're not receiving what they were entitled to, I think it can lead to practices doing some things that are not beneficial for them. One of the things is in improper billing. Up here, I have the ADA claim form, and you see on this form that there's a section for your fee, and that should be your UCR office fee. We've heard from lots of practices that they've been inputting their reimbursement amount for that particular service. So instead of putting their UCR fee for a pro fee that's at, say, $100, they are putting their $60 that they're receiving from that insurance. That can have a negative effect for your practice, but also for all the providers in your area as well. And there's a couple of reasons that happens. Is, well, number one, the insurances that you are submitting that claim form to are collecting that data. And they're using that data to help determine, well, what should be the reimbursement rate for a given area. Also, that information is being collected by, data aggregation companies. Fair Health is one of those companies that then collects that data and sells it back into the marketplace, and mainly to insurers, to again determine what is the market rate for dentistry in a specific area for all the procedures that have been submitted. So we'll look at kind of the next slide here. I think then explains why that is so impactful for dentists individually and for dentists in a specific area. Remember that insurance companies, part of the value that they are providing to their insured members is that discount off of what the market rate is for dentistry, and not just the market rate for a particular dentist. It's the average market rate for an area. So that's why you see again is that, insurance companies will see, they'll collect that data from an area and then look at the highs and lows and get the average of what's being submitted for all the procedure codes. And then they want many times up to a 40% discount off of what the average market rate is. So it's really important to, make sure that you're submitting your UCR office fee on the claim form, and that, you're communicating to the insurance company and the marketplace as a whole, what the cost for dentistry is. So we get to the point then, well, what really can we do about it? We understand now, hey, it's not write-offs, it's adjustment. Okay, we get that, but I'm still not happy that I have to adjust, from my usual and customary fee, my office fee, and I feel like that adjustment's too high, or that the discount that I'm giving to specific insured members is, higher than I want to do. So here are the steps that, we follow here at Unitas, and that we recommend all practices follow to improve the reimbursements that they're getting, or shrink the adjustments or the write-offs that they're currently receiving. So the first step is to evaluate UCR office fees and your production summary, and then to increase your UCR office fees if you feel it's appropriate. Second step is to understand and map out your PPO participation. The third step is to evaluate and compare PPO reimbursements that you're currently receiving. Fourth step is to identify then the opportunities to optimize PPO participation, or even plan level within a specific plan that you're an in-network provider for. The fifth step is then to negotiate reimbursements where you can. And then finally is to implement any optimization strategies that were available to you and that will improve the reimbursements that you're receiving and are still practical from the standpoint that you have access to insured members. So we're going to walk through each one of these steps here. And at the end of this presentation, there's a landing page here where we have a PPO guide that even goes in more depth of each, process that we follow at Unitas. So be sure to stay on and go to that landing page and download that PPO guide. One of my colleagues did a presentation last week where he walked through all those steps as well. So I recommend, if you can get access to it, is watching that replay as well. So as I said, the first step is to evaluate UCR office fees. And there's a couple reasons that this is the first step that you go through. Many insurance companies will ask you for either a full UCR list or the individual codes that you want to negotiate. And so they're going to be looking at that, goes into the process of negotiation. So if your fees are currently low, that can be problematic for you. We've had insurance companies specifically say to practices that you haven't shown that there's any increase in your rate that you're charging your patients, your cash pay rate. Why are you asking us for an increase in the rate of reimbursement? So there is a correlation between your office fees and PPO reimbursements. Again, that we talked about before. They're collecting that information and they're trying to get a discount off of what the average market rate for dentistry is. So there's definitely resources available. I mean, we use the Henry Schein fee analysis, and it gives you a percentile breakdown from the 40th up to the I believe 90th or 95th percentile to show where your fees fit in. We recommend that you go to the 70th or even 80th percentile. Obviously, it depends on your history. Have you stayed? Have you regularly increased or evaluated your office fees every year to 2 years? I know some practices have difficulty jumping up to the 70th or 80th. Again, it's always your choice. You know your area, but if you haven't increased office fees for a number of years, you can take it in steps as well. I think another thing that can help you and determine whether or not you should go to a specific percentile range is look at your current reimbursements that you're receiving. We'll talk about the next steps about how you're going to actually go through and do a chart of all your current reimbursements. But in evaluating your UCRs, looking at your reimbursements and what in-network percentage you're receiving from each insurance company, and then getting an average will help tell you, what range your office fees are in currently, whether they're in the low range, medium range, or high range. Again, you can kind of use the benchmark that most insurance companies kind of want a 25 to 35% discount off of what the average market rate is. So if you're getting reimbursed, 10% of, 85% of what your UCR is for a procedure, it's likely that fee is a little bit low. So again, you can get a Henry Schein UCR fee analysis to help as a guide in setting your fees, and then you can also use your current reimbursement rates to tell you, if you're still in the range of low, medium, high. Then do a production summary. Look at your utilization for the past 12 months, and again, it's just to break down and get the top 35, even 25 codes that are producing the most revenue for your practice. I mean, most practices, the top 35 is about 93 to 95% of total production and collections. And you want to do that because that helps you as you go down and evaluate your reimbursements and how they compare with each other. You can't obviously look at a full reimbursement schedule, nor would it be beneficial to do so. You want to focus on the top codes as when you're comparing current rates of reimbursement from each PPO plan, and also when you're in the negotiation process or evaluating whether to optimize or adjust how you're participating with the plan. The next step then is to understand and map out how you're participating. I mean, we talk to many practices that think they know how they're participating with each plan, but when we've gone through and actually confirmed with each payer, with each PPO insurance company, how they're participating, is it a direct contract? Is it a leased network or a network sharing agreement? Or is it through a network company? And we'll talk about those here in a minute. But again, it's important to confirm how you're participating with each PPO plan, because that's going to make a difference when you're figuring out who you're going to contact to initiate negotiations. Also, what opportunities there may be to adjust how you're participating with a specific plan in order to obtain higher reimbursements. So let's just cover quickly again these different ways that you can participate with a PPO plan. I mean, the first one is obviously a direct contract, and so let's say here in this diagram here, this represents Delta Dental. You say Delta because also Delta is probably one of the few insurance companies that the only way that you can participate with Delta insured members is through a direct contract with Delta Dental of whatever state, or some tri-state deltas in specific areas. So direct participation, you sign that provider agreement, you get that fee schedules associated with that PPO plan, and when those members come in, you charge them according to the reimbursement schedule. So second type of way that you can participate is through a shared network agreement. They're also called, panel sharing, leased network arrangement. And this one we're showing here is between PPO insurance companies or payers. One that's a kind of a really common pair-to-pair relationship is principal and emeritus. They share a network with each other, and it's also reciprocal, meaning that you can contract with principal through a direct contract, and by virtue of that one contract with principal, you can also participate with emeritus insured members. And then a lot of times that's going to be based off of that principal fee schedule, because that's who you have the direct contract with. There's lots of these relationships out there. We've seen more and more payers enter into relationships with each other, and specific payers get more aggressive with opening up their network. I mean, sharing it with more and more PPO insurance companies or payers. The final one is through third-party administrators, or they're referred to in a lot of different ways. I mean, we call them umbrella networks, network companies. We say umbrella because there's a network of insurance companies that fall under this umbrella, and so as a provider, if you contract directly with that network company, you can participate with members of multiple plans by virtue of that one contract. I mean, they're also called network aggregators, repricers. again, because they aggregate the different companies, insurance companies and plans under one network, and then contract with dentists so that dentists can access the insured members under one fee schedule. The reason that these can be beneficial for dentists is that it can give you an access to multiple insured members, again, through one contract. And oftentimes the network fee schedule can be higher than a direct contract with a payer who falls under the network. So again, it's important that you go through and figure out how you're participating with each plan and make a map and keep it current. Then you want to evaluate and compare how you're being reimbursed by each payer. These are some of the tools that we use at Unitas. I mean, there's some spreadsheets, again, for each individual plan showing the top 35 codes for a practice, the applicable UCR for each code, and then the applicable reimbursement amount. And then showing, what the adjustment amount is and the percentage of in-network reimbursement that payer is providing. You want to go through and have a chart that shows all the different payers that you are contracted with or participating with. And it gives you a really good idea of, again, what average you're receiving. And then you can see which ones are reimbursing you below average, above average. And again, use this information when you're negotiating with payers to increase reimbursement amounts. Fifth step is, again, you want to identify these opportunities to adjust or optimize participation. And that goes back to understanding how you participate with each plan and what options are available. As I said, lots of payers are continuing to enter into agreements with each other. Sometimes the relationships are reciprocal, meaning it doesn't matter who you contract with, that if you contract with one, you pick up the members of the other a payer who is part of that agreement, or they can be one way. So there is no flow through it unless you're contracted with the payer who has access to other insured members through another shared agreement. And you can oftentimes switch. There's definitely risks associated with that. We'll talk about a little bit more, but there are opportunities, and that can at times give you leverage, or at least know if negotiations are denied, what options that you have to still participate with a specific plan, but maybe just in a different way. And then you just want to reach out and initiate negotiations with all the payers that you're contracted with or participating with. Again, before you do negotiations or initiate negotiations, follow the first 4 steps. Evaluate your office fees. Make sure you have your top 35 codes with your current reimbursements compared with each other. And you kind of understand the current in-network reimbursement amount that you're receiving from each payer across your top 35 codes. You want to have a list of the provider relations so that you can, readily at your fingertips, contact them, and then track where you're at, what status of negotiations is. Have you made that request? Are you getting currently a fee review? Have you received a response? You also, again, want to pay attention to your production summary and the codes that are most meaningful for your practice, because there are times that an insurance company will engage in negotiations saying, well, tell me what codes are important to you. And they may pull dollars from codes that are not as important to you and put them over there and kind of balance your fee schedule offer in that manner. And then again, understand how you participate and what options are available to you, because some insurance companies understand that as well, and they want to keep you as part of their proprietary network. So that can at times provide some leverage. But again, I think you need to make sure that you've determined if you don't get a competitive offer, whether or not you are willing to terminate participation with that specific plan. We don't recommend that you ever threaten falsely that you're going to leave a plan. If you've decided that it's just not worth your participation in plan because of the reimbursements, unless you can get them higher, well, then be sure that you're going to be able to follow through with that if you don't receive the offer that you're looking for. Finally, implement the optimization opportunities that exist if it's going to lead to a higher level of reimbursement and still provide you access to the insured members that you're either currently seeing or that you want to have access to. So there's a couple things to remember. And again, I put up here, you can optimize participation, but be very careful because it can get difficult and get confusing. I mean, network sharing relationships, whether peer-to-peer or under third-party administrators, changes. They may not grant or provide access to all members of a specific plan. It may only be applicable to specialists or only applicable to general practitioners. It also may not be applicable in a specific state. The benefits may not coordinate in the same way as when you were directly contracted with a PPO plan. Also, insurance companies, they have the ability that if you were directly contracted with them to block your participation with them through another network. So these are the things that you really want to keep in mind and be sure that you understand, the networks that are available to you in your area, in your specialty, and that you do understand that there's a risk that you may not be picked up. Now, we know that if you follow these steps, that they do work. I mean, we've worked with, again, thousands of practices over the course of the last 10 years. I mean, we currently work with 1,000 locations. You can see that if you negotiate with payers that you can, get rates of reimbursement that they may not, be as high as you want them to be, but they do make a difference. I mean, we've worked with doctors in North Carolina and pretty much all over the country, California. I think we have an example in Texas. I mean, these are just a kind of few examples. But if you're able to negotiate 3 or 4 of your current contracts, maybe optimize a couple other ones, it can be really meaningful. I mean, these dollars amounts that we're showing up here are based on actual results with our customers. And it's a projection based upon completing your top 35 codes just 10 times each. So it can be really meaningful from a revenue standpoint. So like I told you, here's a landing page for our PPO guide. It's a really, in-depth review of the process that we go through when we work with our clients to help them negotiate reimbursements or optimize participation. So I encourage you to go to this landing page and download this guide. And then if you have any questions following that we welcome you to reach out and schedule a time to speak with us. We offer a complimentary 30-minute consultation to any doctor or practice personnel. So if you're looking for help to, evaluate how you currently participate, review current reimbursements, even if you just have questions, we certainly welcome and encourage you to call. So if there's any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Perfect. Thank you. We made this one shorter. There's a couple hundred of you on right now. So if there are any questions out there, type them in the chat or Q&A. We've had tons on the previous PPO related webinars, so I know they're out there. But let's get right into it. If your practice is located in a major metropolitan area and there are hundreds of dentists participating in your plans, do you have any ability to negotiate fees?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, You've obviously hit on the fact that, I mean, if you're in an area that it's densely populated with dentists and all the dentists are participating with, PPO plans, it certainly can make it more difficult. But at the same time, I mean, insurance companies do understand that they need to increase rates of reimbursement. And you'll see from year to year, that they'll send a new fee schedule, but that's not the negotiation process. They'll offer, some increases on certain codes, but unless you reach out and contact them, they're not going to just, increase reimbursements to the level that, you would find competitive. So it certainly does impact your ability. I mean, some insurance companies will tell you, hey, we've just got, within, a mile radius of you, 50 other dentists who are in our network. So, I mean, we want to keep you, but if the rates aren't good enough for you, then we understand. So, I mean, that's when, again, you can look at and see if there's opportunities to adjust how you're participating with that specific plan. Maybe there's a shared network with another payer or through a leased network.
All right. We get this question every webinar. Does Delta Dental negotiate?
We haven't seen a lot of success. I mean, we've had some very limited success, I think, in just unique situations where there's one dentist within a 20-mile radius. Or, Delta said, hey, we really need this specific doctor. But, I think it's unlikely currently still that, Delta is going to negotiate on its PPO fee schedule. Premier is obviously a little bit different, and the states that still allow Premier only, I mean, that's based on your UCR. Sometimes they won't even give you or tell you what you're receiving as far as reimbursement for specific codes. And you'll ask for what's my Premier schedule. They won't send it to you. They say, well, it depends. You have to submit your office fee. And it goes back to why it's so important to keep your office fees, at a competitive level and evaluate them each year, especially if you're a Premier dentist. I mean, that's continuing to go away. Fewer and fewer states, deltas are allowing a Premier only status. But if you're in that situation, I think you're fortunate. Again, it's important that you're keeping your office fees competitive, and if you're don't know what they're reimbursing you, monitor your EOBs. And we know not lots of customers that'll kind of build out their own Delta Premier fee schedule based upon the EOBs and the reimbursements that they're receiving.
Are your service fees based on a flat rate or a percentage of anticipated PPO plan reimbursement for an individual office?
Ours are flat rate. So for one practice with one doctor, we charge just under $6,000 for a 12-month program. So it's under $500 a month. We go through this process that I've laid out. I mean, we're going to confirm how you participate, make sure we have all your fee schedules, prepare a report for you, and then implement a negotiation and optimization plan. I mean, we usually know within about the first 90 days after we've completed that report, what we're going to be able to do. Optimization can take some time. And obviously, we want to make sure you really understand if we're going to implement any optimization for you, that you understand the risks and benefits for it. So that's we really try to act as an extension of your team. We represent you with the insurance companies and trying to get the best reimbursements that we can for you. We also want to just give you as much information as we can about PPO participation, what's available out there. Maybe that you're looking to drop plans and want to replace one plan with another. So as far as kind of a contingency relationship, I mean, I'm an attorney, and I obviously believe that a contingency relationship works in many situations. We've always been apprehensive, and I just feel like it doesn't make sense, or it's not the right thing to do in this space. I think that the reason that is interests can diverge. I mean, we can say, hey, here's this great, fee schedule for you. It's a network fee schedule, but that may not be in your best interest. I mean, again, at the end of the day, we want to act in your best interest. We want your dental practice to be a better business, to make more money. And we just wouldn't ever want to get in a situation where the interests didn't align with each other, or was even perceived that we weren't acting in your best interest.
Great. Before we continue, would you mind putting the PPO guide slide back up?
You bet.
Thank you. This is an interesting comment here, open to your thoughts. We currently only contract with 2 networks, Cigna and Risk Management, and are a Delta Premier provider. We bill at the contracted rate, but you say it's better to bill UCR. However, my doctors don't like seeing all those write-offs.
See, I mean, I think that's the reason why it is important to, not even use the term write-off, because you weren't entitled to receive your UCR amount. I mean, you by contract, you've agreed to accept the adjusted amount, and it then does these things that people are submitting their reimbursement amount and not their UCR office fee. And again, it can affect your practice, and it can affect the market rate for your area. I mean, again, we've heard two reasons that, practices have done that, because they have an associate and they're doing it on production. And so by using the UCR rate that's actually different than the collected amount, they're overcompensating their associates. That's an agreement between the practice and that associate that needs to be adjusted, not how you should properly bill.
Delta and MetLife haven't moved our contracted fees for the past 2 years. What do you suggest I do next?
Well, I think, again, if you're participating with multiple PPO plans, you want to evaluate how many patients you have from each plan, whether there would be, if you left one of those plans, what the impact to your practice would be. I mean, we've had lots of practices that have said, hey, I can't accept these Delta PPO reimbursements anymore. I'm not making enough money. There's no margin for me to see these patients. It almost seems like my cash pay patients and my other plan patients are subsidizing my participation with Delta. I think you need to evaluate whether or not participating with that plan is what's best financially for your practice. And again, I know that can be difficult as well, and it may not be feasible for your practice at this time. It may be, again, that if you're not participating with any other plans but MetLife and Delta, that you should look at diversifying and maybe adding more plans so you're not so reliant on that Delta and MetLife patient population. With respect to MetLife, I have seen them actually moving more. And so I really recommend that you contact them and, again, go through these steps first. Let them know what you're being reimbursed. Increase your office fees. Let them know that, you've now adjusted your office fees to be competitive for your area, and let them know why they should provide higher rates of reimbursement to your practice. Also know, it's probably something I should have mentioned previously, is know how many patients that you do have and the claim dollars that you've been submitting. Losing claim dollars from a practice is meaningful. When they lose providers to their network, and MetLife is one that actually does provide decent out-of-network benefits, that disrupts their network for a specific area. They do want to maintain you. Every insurance representative we talk to, they do recognize that there is a mutual relationship that they have with you as the dental provider. Obviously they just have different stakeholders than you do, and they're trying to do the best they can for their insured members, meaning they want the highest discount. So I think just everybody has to make sure that they're acting in their own best interest.
We did have another question simply saying, what can you do with MetLife? I know you just talked about them, but is there anything else you care to add?
Yeah, for sure. I would initiate negotiations with them, but then also, understand that MetLife, there are opportunities to participate with members of MetLife plan. It's more limited. It can depend upon your area, but it is limited to one patient group, the PDP plus members. So there's multiple network companies that have MetLife PDP Plus under their network. So if you're currently direct with MetLife, there are some options. You again have to be very careful. We've seen MetLife being one of those payers that when a provider who's directly contracted with them terminates their direct contract, they've held them out of any network relationship for a period of time between 6 and 12 months. And again, it could be indefinitely, but I think the average we're seeing is somewhere between 6 and 12 months. So there are options there, but again, you just have to approach them very carefully.
How do you find your correct provider relations department?
Well, we maintain a list that we have. Because we're calling provider relations for each state all day, every week. We probably are putting out, several hundred calls a day to different insurance companies to the provider relations. So we've maintained a list. A lot of times you can, if you go to the website, go to, your state, you can track a number down. And that's why I said it's kind of sounds, it sounds a little bit, obvious to it, but maintain that list, because these numbers change and your representative can change. So after you've kind of gotten a contact that, you've been speaking with, make sure you maintain that, because again, we talk to provider relations all the time, and there's lots of good people. They do want to help. Like I said, you just need to make sure that, you're acting in your best interests, and, when you can negotiate, really evaluating whether that's a competitive rate for you. And if it's not, what options you do have.
What are your views on HealthPlex, and does participation make our office a Medicaid provider?
I don't know. HealthPlex, I've heard of it, but I don't have enough knowledge or experience on that specific company. I know that I have team members here that do. If you want to email me, please do, and I will respond to that email about HealthPlex. I don't think your question as far as whether it would make you a Medicaid provider. I don't think so. There's lots of confusion, I think, as far as between Medicare and Medicaid. If you're a Medicaid office in most states, you have to go through a fairly rigorous application process and then be designated Medicaid, and then have your rates of payment for Medicaid. Medicare is different. There's lots of Medicare Advantage plan holders that utilize commercial networks. HealthPlex may be one of those. Delta, other large payers open their network to Medicaid Advantage members, and a lot of times you may not even know that they're a Medicaid Advantage holder. You're just treating them like they're a Delta PPO insured member.
If doing complex rehabilitation and patient agrees to pay for the extra work, like a special lab, can you get in trouble with the insurance company if their PPO fee is lower by quite a bit?
Well, again, you have to go through the guidebook that they send you. They usually send a pretty thick guide that kind of walks you through different scenarios. A lot of times that we've seen that when it comes to lab fees, the insurance company will say that's included. That cost is included in the reimbursement amount. And a lot of times they'll even say that kind of in your schedule, or pages attached to that schedule. So. Yeah, you want to probably call again and verify benefits and say this is what the patient's asking for. Sometimes if it's a higher level of service, you can have the patient sign a form saying they understand that this is a covered service for this specific procedure and using this specific lab. I've elected for a higher level of material or service and agree to pay the difference. But again, you can get in trouble. You want to make sure you double check that if you go through these steps of having the patient acknowledge and sign that, and that they're paying the difference out of pocket, it may be okay.
Is there any prediction for the new grads to get reimbursed for Delta Premier at the same rates the veteran dentists are?
If I had to predict, I would say no. Let me walk you back. Several years ago, what happened in California? It's going about 5 or 6 years now. In California, Delta said, we're doing away with Premier. No one is going to be able to have Premier only status. You can be Premier and PPO, which means essentially you're Premier. They grandfathered in those doctors that were just Premier only, but any single change in the contract, like they moved locations or changed even entity name, I believe in one instance, that changed the contract and that doctor was no longer Premier only. So, any new doctors that enroll in Delta in California, they're Premier and PPO, which again, essentially means you're PPO. So even in a state that allows Premier, I think, again, Delta across the country, they're doing away with Premier only status. So I think it's unlikely. But again, check with your specific Delta provider relations. Just say, hey, here's the scenario. I have an associate coming in. I want them to be Premier only. It may be still available in your specific state, but those are becoming fewer and far between.
We think Delta Dental has a monopoly on other PPOs, at least in our state of Washington. Their fees are low, but we are a small office and most of our patients are on it. What would you recommend?
Oh, Washington Dental. One of my good friends is a dentist in Washington. And I mean, when I started working here 7 years ago, he was super excited that maybe we could do something with Washington Dental. I mean, I agree with you. I think that's part of the lawsuit that's been filed against all the separate entity deltas is that there's kind of a monopoly situation. I mean, that's, the ADA lawsuit representing a number of dentists. And again, it's against every single Delta entity that they're kind of, operating unfairly or in some type of monopoly situation. I think that litigation is about a year or so in. It'll be interesting to see how that turns out. I mean, I think like most litigation, it'll probably end in settlement, but I mean, that could be beneficial. I mean, I think the other thing that is obviously a big thing is the antitrust exemption that insurance companies previously had is now gone. The exemption to the McCarran-Ferguson Act. So I think it's a little bit too early to tell how that is going to impact insurers and on the dental benefits side of things. As far as what you could specifically do in the state of Washington, again, I think it comes to trying to diversify. I know maybe you're just in an area where there's not very many other insurance companies that have any market share. So there's not very many other insured members, but evaluating and trying to diversify, maybe opening up to a few other plans to try to reduce reliance on that Delta patient population. Also, in-house plan. If you don't have an in-house plan for your practice, Washington's a little bit of a unique state in that area too, that you actually have to go through a fairly kind of vigorous review process to have your own in-house plan. So make sure you work with an attorney. But again, you want to give your patients options, and tell them why. I mean, why are you utilizing this plan when you can come and be on my plan, which is going to be a cheaper, premium or just, monthly fee for you, and you get these included, or you get this discount off, our usual and customary fee. So I think every general practice should have its own in-house discount plan. Again, just for even if you don't, market it, that you know that you have a patient who's a cash paying patient that comes in, or a patient who's exhausted benefits, and so that you can charge your UCR if you're in a non-dictation state, that you can tell them, hey, we've got a plan that can help you. You need to get this treatment. So ensure that you have solutions to those patients that are saying, I can't afford to get that treatment. So I wish I had better answers for you in the state of Washington, and that's where I went to school. And like I said, one of my good friends is a practicing dentist up there. But I think it's going to be a few more years until the market share changes course, probably across the country. I mean, Delta still has a significant market share, but specifically in Washington.
Can you negotiate Delta PPO in California?
Not that we've seen. Again, I think if you had a really unique situation as far as where you were located, something unique about your practice. But again, I don't ever like to say, hey, no one negotiates, because we do see these different scenarios. And again, I'm hopeful that will change across the country and every state, depending upon kind of the outcome of the lawsuit against the Deltas, or just change in the marketplace, that Delta starts to lose market share. Remember, Delta's benefits only in most states are dental benefits only. It's going up against major medical insurance that I think just over the last 5 years or so realized what kind of a significant moneymaker that the dental benefits can be. From what I've seen, I believe that Delta is losing market share. But right now, again, because they have so many dental providers that are accepting low rates of reimbursement, that gives them the opportunity to go to the clients, the employer groups, and say, hey, look, here's a benefit plan that we can set up for you. And you have access to all these providers that are, giving these huge discounts. So, I do think it does come down to, every individual dentist. Obviously you can't act in concert or anything like that. That could be an antitrust violation. But I think when you're looking at your own business, if participating with Delta PPO doesn't make sense from a reimbursement standpoint, again, it goes with any plans that, If the revenue that you're generating from participation in one plan isn't providing, a consistent revenue stream covering the cost of providing a high quality care dental and providing them a margin that's fair and reasonable, well, then you really should evaluate whether participating in that plan makes sense for your practice.
Years ago, it was acceptable to charge the patient the difference between your fee and the insurance fee. Are there any plans that still provide that?
Yeah, I don't think there's any. Well, not that I can think of off the top of my head that there's any plans that allow balance billing. I don't. I mean, again, your contract terms usually state that you agree to accept, your UCR fee or the fee schedule amount, whichever is lower. And just a quick aside here on that, we've seen practices that have their office fees lower than a reimbursement payment. So again, it goes back to evaluating your fees and making sure that they're set competitively. But, back to, balance billing. Yeah, I don't think that there's any plans that allow that. Contract language says that you agree to accept that fee as full and final payment and that you won't charge anything else. Again, there can be these circumstances when they're getting a higher level of service or higher level of materials, but you need to, I'd be very careful. Make sure you check that because again, if the insurance company comes back and says, well, you couldn't do this, what they do is usually send a letter to your patient and say, hey, your dentist shouldn't have charged you. So that can put you in a difficult situation with your patient.
Great. Well, it looks like we got through all of the questions, so we'll wrap a little early tonight. Thank you, everyone, for all the questions. If you do have any questions in the meantime that we didn't answer or that you do think of, please feel free to email info@unitasdental.com, and Matt and his team will get an answer back to you. Matt, I, of course, want to thank you for your time. If anyone is interested in attending future Henry Schein webinars, visit henryscheindental.com/webinars for our upcoming schedule. This webinar was recorded, so we'll get that out to you sometime in the next week. Thank you all for joining us and hope to see you back here soon. Have a great night.
Thank you, everyone.